Hi, Greg. Thank you so much for coming on Authentic AI for Entrepreneurs. I'm so excited to bring you on the show.
Oh, thanks, Kinsey, for having me on. I'm excited to chat all things AI and life and humanity with you.
Oh, yeah, we're going to nerd out about all the things. But before we do, I did already introduce you just a little bit in the intro, but I'd love to hear from you. Who are you? What do you do? Who do you serve?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a loaded question because when I used to live in New York, the answer was always work based. And then now that I've moved to Austin, Texas, the answer is what you do in your spare time. But I'll keep it professional on this one. I'm Greg Brooks. I'm a partner and CMO at Search Tides, which is basically a hub for all things search, AI, SEO, the future of business and commerce in this new AI era that we're going into. We've been playing with AI for a while. We were using models before ChatGPT came out. And so we talk about this stuff on our website. We talk about it on our social media. Ultimately, we think that it's really going to drive the way that business in the future works, but not in the ways that people are thinking or assuming it will.
Yeah. Oh, I am so excited to chat with you about the future of AI. I know because it's all unfolding around us. It's happening right now. It's so exciting. But before we dive into all that, I do just like to ask, how did you guys start dipping your toes into the world of AI? What did that look like for you?
Most people think that AI is this magician of sorts, where you do a trick and then all of a sudden a rabbit appears out of your hat. But the number one use for AI, and it will continue to be so for the foreseeable future, is basically this thing that can string together a bunch of actions. If I tell it to take 10 steps forward and two to the right and then go 10 steps forward again, I don't have to walk those steps, but I can't necessarily say, can you just walk from A to B because it'll get stuck on a wall randomly. And so AI in a very basic capacity has been around for a long time. Zapier is a popular tool where it's like, we're going to hook this app to this app to that. Like that is exactly what AI is. And so at Search Tides, we started using it to try to just string together repetitive things that we already did. And this was in a lot of our link building programs specifically, where we would have to figure out whether or not lots of websites were good fits for us and for our agency clients at the time. And then we wanted to have conversations and all of those things. So, in the very onset of it, AI has enabled us to make that happen automatically. Then we started getting a little friskier with more complex stuff where it's like, okay, how can we train these things to then actually do something that most people would feel looks like is learning? So I think probably our proudest achievement to date is we had a 6 email conversation back and forth with the website about trying to generate a placement on that website for our client. And it was only done by AI on our side. We had no idea the conversation was happening. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know what the contents of it, but this thing figured out a way to reply, to come up with 3 good replies on different topics automatically to basically like land this deal. Now, that's not something that has like full scalability because there's so many edge cases to that. But that is sort of the power of you can automate 80% of that really easily. And I think that's kind of how we think about AI today.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about how can you automate as much as possible while still maintaining your brand's authenticity, feeling aligned with the way you're using it, and making sure that we don't all turn into robots or create a Terminator future for ourselves, right? Let's talk a little bit about the SEO part of Search Tides and how it's related to AI. What does that look like for you guys?
That's a great question. The number one thing that people, I think, kind of mistake with SEO, and the number one reason why people do things that they think are best practices and might even be, but they don't get good results from it, is because their website was not as strong as their competitors. And in the world of search, that simply means they didn't have enough high quality links. So if you're a new website, shall we make up an industry or someone in an industry, or shall I make it up on the fly? Do we want to have a running example?
Let's do a
Okay, great.
photographer in Colorado.
Okay. So Well, let's do two examples. One of them is your example, which is going to be specific to a location.
Mhm.
And so I'm a photographer. I'm in Colorado. I take fantastic photos of mountains, but also, of lakes in winter and all the fun stuff that Colorado does. In Google, that is going to be mostly about what's called relevance. How many signals are being sent from the internet, not from my website, but from the internet, that I am a photographer and that I am relevant to this location in Chicago. And so, in Google terms or in search engine terms, those types of factors might be things like, are reviews talking about me on the internet someplace? Do I have recognition from local communities in Colorado? Are they linking to my website, the Chamber of Commerce? Are other photographers mentioning me on the internet? That's creating relevance to photography. And so all of those things happen off of our website. But we think, well, if I just change these words on my website, I'll get there. And yes, but not just if you do that. So it's about what happens off of your website, which then is also combined with on your website. Most people fall a little short is they don't realize that what's happening off your website is just as, if not more, important than what's happening on your website.
Okay, that makes sense, and I'm glad that you brought that up because I have always found SEO stuff to be one of those things where I'm like, I mean, I'm showing up, I think I'm doing it right, but who knows? So, how does AI technology, like, play into that? How can it be helpful for us?
I think that there's two basically frameworks to think about this from. The first one
Mhm.
is I have done a good job on all of those external pieces of my business. And now I'm ready to improve the website itself. As a photographer in Colorado, it is way more likely that you will get way more value from trying to increase your audience on social media or by building up your reviews online or by building up your Google My Business page where people can quote check you out. What's your body of work that you're putting out there? That most of the time doesn't start with your website. It most of the time ends with your website. And so think of the definition of SEO is changing. The first time is right now, and then the next time will be soon also. But the first time is just really what's your visibility online? Because that is now going to dictate more than ever if people will come to your website through a search engine. So that's the first piece. The AI compartment can come in two different ways, but the best way to play into that is to create content on your website that is relevant to your audience that you can use AI to help you create. Now, a photographer probably actually isn't going to be that heavy on written content on their website because that's not what I'm not teaching you anything. So, any other business, you have something that you need to educate a customer about before they buy. And that's the ethos that you should be creating content from. And you can use AI to do that. And I can give a step-by-step process on how to do that. But I think in terms of AI and search, there's typically two things. The first thing is just AI governs a lot of what shows up. So we can talk about what that looks like, or we can stay focused on how do we use AI to kind of help with the customer journey and help create content that really resonates with people and showcases us as experts and showcases us as people with experience, aka people who are like justified to be talking about these things.
Yeah, totally. Let's start with how AI kind of decides what we see and stuff, because I actually did want to ask you about that too, if you have any
Okay.
thoughts when it comes to, I know that Google and also even OpenAI, ChatGPT are trying to incorporate more search capabilities and stuff like that into it. Just tell us what your thoughts are on this.
I think basically like what's the biggest question that actually is being answered when I'm on ChatGPT or on Google or I'm searching for a topic on Instagram? We're human beings. trying to increase knowledge about something. We're trying to learn more about something. It might be relevant to a purchase, it might be for our own entertainment. We are ultimately trying to learn more. And so if you then back up and say, okay, all of this stuff is about people just trying to learn more, what comes back as the result, whether it's a result on Instagram, whether it's ChatGPT spitting back an answer at me, whether it's Google giving me search results, all of those stem from this idea to have a person every single time someone searched go through the catalog of information and be like, you might like these. So we let a computer do it. And so it's been AI in that instance for a very long time. Now in search, AI is getting more involved in one area specifically. And that's what we're calling the helpfulness of content, which has basically governed the last 3 algorithm updates and has really, for me and for us at Search Tides, it's really blurred the line between what's good business practice and what's good SEO. And so a lot of
Mm.
what we talk about and suggest to people is, hey, little less focus on your meta tags, little more focus on how can you create something that showcases what's called your EEAT, your expertise, your experience. How do you showcase your authoritativeness on a topic? And how do you showcase your trustworthiness on a topic? And those are just good business principles. You're basically saying, this is why I am a valid choice for this thing that you may want to, as a consumer, engage with.
Yeah, totally. And I know with the Google update, the focus on value driven content or quality content. It was interesting. I also, right around the time it came out, interviewed John from Originality AI. I mentioned that before we started recording. And it was a little bit like, I felt like slightly playing into the fear factor for me, or maybe one of their newsletters was playing into that, where
Okay.
they were just like, 1,500 websites have been shut down because of the Google update or whatever. And have you been seeing websites being affected by all the new recent updates when it comes to that stuff?
Yeah, I think every algorithm update affects many different websites in a very meaningful way because it's basically a surprise test. It's a surprise exam. And it's, have you been practicing things that are forward facing? And we've always taken the perspective with Google and with anything else, like Google wants to minimize the amount of websites that it trusts and that it gives search results to, because that's going to make it more likely that someone's going to get the right answer. And so, okay, what does that mean? Well, you're safest acting and putting out content in a way that showcases you as a leader in your space. And a leader in your space could be a photographer in Colorado, and it could also be a national brand in the finance industry or whatever your space is. How are you helping people and showcasing that you are an expert, that you have lots of experience, that you do have credentials to be authoritative? And also, there's lots of third party endorsements that say, hey, this person or this business, thumbs up, which is trustworthiness. And so, if you do those things at a conceptual level, what you're really doing is you're building brand equity. What you're really doing is standing for something as a brand. And those are all important things to do because ultimately consumers need to choose you. And there needs to be a compelling reason to do that, both now and in the future. So we focus less on, there's a smaller universe of websites that are killing it or on the verge of killing it in SEO. But for everybody else outside of that universe, it's mostly about providing value through your own unique things that you can bring to the table in a way that meets your customer wherever they are on their customer journey, whatever medium that means, whether it's written, whether it's video, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's someone who's just becoming aware of their problems, or whether someone's trying to decide between you and some other options. And it's just providing that value over and over again without the expectation of anything in return, because that's what's going to be best for the customer.
I am cracking up over here because I feel like it's just good business advice, guys. And I like that you bring it back to the human first stuff. Once again, I feel like in the AI world and when we start using these tools, it's so easy to get swept up in the, oh my gosh, there's so many possibilities, opportunities. I can do so much more quickly. And there's also a lot of, I call them the AI bros in this space that are like pushing for
Right.
quantity over quality. So let's talk about creating content with the help of AI tools, but making sure that we're maintaining alignment with our brand values and customers.
Sure. So here's how I would do that exact thing that you just said, Kinsey. So I want to create a piece of content and I want it to adhere to principles of being helpful. I want to bring my unique experience to the table. I can do a couple things. If I have it about a specific topic, I
Mhm.
can put that topic into Google and I can grab all the articles that I like or that are at the top of the search results, or I can load up some videos and I can transcribe those videos so I can get the text from those videos. And then I can load all those things into ChatGPT and I could say, hey, ChatGPT, can you kind of give me summaries of all the topics that these things talk about, that they discuss? And now you can kind of get this universal lens of here's what is seemingly important in the things that you like. And if you're trying to rank on Google, then you stick with the articles and now you have the structure of what ranks on Google. If you're less concerned with that, maybe you're making a video or something like that and it's going on your socials. Now you just might have talking points that make sense too. If we're writing this for Google, what we would do at Search Ties is we would actually upload, we would paste in the helpfulness content guidelines from Google directly into ChatGPT. And we'd say, hey, by the way, we want to adhere to these guidelines. So we're starting to feed. And you could see like there's two things happening throughout this entire example, Kinsey, which is number one, we know what we are looking for. So you have to know what you're looking for. But number two, we're basically using ChatGPT as either a research assistant or an analyst or an editor.
Mhm.
So now we have all this stuff. And now we can start to get an outline of what we're looking for. And maybe we start to create, like, if it's video, it's storyboards or some notes and things like that. If it's written, maybe we start writing out some paragraphs or some outlines or whatever it is. Then we can feed that back. And then we can say stuff like, hey, I'm looking to include examples of experience or of expertise according to these guidelines. Can you suggest additional areas where I can do that in this article? Can you suggest, like, how could I incorporate stats or facts that I can quote and reference? Can you pull some from me? That's going to add trustworthiness. Hey, what are some good topics that and resources that I can provide people authoritativeness? Hey, ChatGPT, can you remove the fluff? Here's how we define fluff. Can you remove the fluff? And so you can see again, can see like we know what we're looking for, but we're like, all right, we could read all those articles. We could do that note taking ourselves. We could ask a friend to remove fluff, or we could just have this thing do it. And that's really the homeostasis. And so in business, I would take the exact same methodology. Like if we were a manager at a company or we were in a leadership position, they're that famous thing. I think it's called like the Eisenhower matrix or something like that. You have those four squares and they're like, all right, here's how you delegate. You make one of your squares is things that are urgent and important. Another one is not urgent but important. This one is urgent but not important. And then you delegate that. You can do that exact thing with AI.
Mhm.
And so you can take like out of this thing that I'm about to do, what is the stuff that I must do? What is the stuff that I could delegate out given the skill set of the quote unquote thing, person, entity, whatever, and basically go from there. So that like, yeah, you have to be the expert. You still should be able to bring your unique perspective to the table, but the process of creation should be a lot easier.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. We align with this so much because that's exactly how I teach AI tools to my students. I feel like a lot of people especially when they're just dipping their toes into using AI tools. They have really high expectations and different expectations than what they should probably have, where they're like, okay, write me a social media caption, write me a blog, do my research for me. They just expect these tools to be all knowing and understanding and be the expert. And then they want the tools to do the work for them. And then they get frustrated with the results they're getting because they're generic or they're just not correct in a way, or it's not aligned with their brand. And it's like, that's actually exactly how I teach everything when it comes to using AI tools is working with it as if it is the team member, the analyst, the
Right.
assistant, even the coach, you can use it like that, but think of it as like that assistant who you're collaborating with. And also, exactly, take it in the step by step, bring your own expertise, know what you're looking for, explain what you're looking for to ChatGPT. I teach people bring your own opinions and expertise to these tools when you're getting it to write a blog post. Don't just say, write me a blog post on this. Say, here's how we feel about this. Here's what we think about this. And then even when writing like
Mm,
captions or copywriting, I'm like, don't just say, write me a social media caption. Give it the formula of start with an engaging hook, transition into an emotive circumstance or something, go on to making a big point or a takeaway. It's like, tell it exactly what you want. And that's really how you'll be the most productive and get exactly what you're looking for. And also responses that actually align with your brand, make sense for your brand, and aren't just the generic stuff that everyone seems to be copy pasting
right.
into their emails and social media captions these days?
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, it's a post that ChatGPT makes is not on brand for you. Have you given it access to all of your posts? Hey, a post that this thing made for you is too generic. Did you provide feedback about what makes it generic and what you would rather see instead, and and go back and forth until you got what you wanted out of it, and then you came back to the same thread and tried. So just like people, it's the same thing with like this is most of I think the challenges come from, and you already said it, Kinsey, like most of the challenges come from people just don't know how to be good managers. And so they
Mm.
don't know how to onboard a person. They just think if they tell someone one thing one time, it's going to be perfect. And then they're surprised when it's not. And now you have this thing that like doesn't have a human brain. So it doesn't have the ability to I have no idea what does have the ability, but there's something that's even more challenging, I think, than with a human, because a human you can basically say, go figure it out, and then it'll come back later and could potentially do that from side conversations that it has that doesn't involve you. Here, there's only one way to learn, and that's through you.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting to think about too. Let's talk about the future of AI just a little bit because I know that you guys have lots of thoughts on what that might look like and how it might evolve. So, what do you think? What's the outlook?
Yeah. Um, I think that in terms of the future of AI, there's a lot of different directions we can go in. The direction that I'd like to start in is what the future of basically business is going to be.
Mm,
And let's get this out of the way. At a very individual level, simply people who are able and comfortable to use AI tools, it is the equivalent of using a sewing machine compared to hand sewing something. That's the equivalent. That's just the reality. In terms of bigger picture changes in the economy or just in like the business landscape, we saw last year a bunch of like very public layoffs from a lot of companies that basically said this thing about optimization and AI. And what does that actually mean? I couldn't tell you. But what I do know is that if you're a company with 1,000 people, whereas you previously might have needed to hire 500 people to get to that next level, maybe now you're hiring 100 people or 200. And so there's less people coming into the same areas that there were previously. An average person is now able to do more. Now, all of a sudden, one person is able to do something that might have taken 3 or 4 people to do previously, or 5 people are able to do things that might have taken 30 people to do previously. And this will just be exaggerated the further we go and the more AI becomes prevalent because the tools are going to get better, not worse. I think that's a pretty reasonable assumption. But so
mm,
all of this is basically just adding up to you're going to have way more one person businesses, 3 people businesses that are creating like very livable wages for people and maybe even more than that. And there's just going to be a lot of them. And this is going to lead to more consumer choice enabled by technology, which is exactly what we've seen in content. We had 3 TV stations, then 13, then 50, then 500. And now we have millions and millions across YouTube and TikTok. And I think something similar is going to happen with businesses. And this will basically lead to more consumer choice in every industry. The large conglomerate businesses, where if people don't want to have to think about what makes sense for them, they're going to go to Walmart Square tomorrow. They're going to go to the Costco from Idiocracy, whatever it is. Like that will still exist. But on the other side of it, everyone who wants to have a choice will now be able to choose something that's really the best option for them. And so flip yourself now, your brand. What do you need to do? Well, you really need to be the best option for someone. So you can't really be the jack of all trades anymore. You have to stand for something. You have to have an identity. You have to, in some capacity, be polarizing. 100% of people should not have a positive opinion about you because that's not polarizing at all. And also, you have to be very customer centric because if I'm a consumer and I have lots of choice, who am I going to go with? The person who has been hooking me up without asking for anything in return, seemingly forever, or someone who just comes onto my radar asking me for something. So I think the challenge of acquiring a customer is going to go way up in the future for an average business. Ultimately, that's going to come down to who can be authentically customer driven. Who doesn't try to be best in class, because being best in class is trying to just outdo what your competitors are doing, but you don't even think that way. You're just like, how do I best serve the customer? That's what the conversation is inside of your company. I think those are what are, ironically, like, what does that have to do with AI? Directly, not much. Indirectly, I think it's a consequence of the technology that enables consumer choice, basically.
Yeah, I love that perspective. That's you're giving me lots to mull over later today for
Okay.
sure. I love it. One more thing. What else do I want to ask you? And I'm forgetting. Oh well. I'm sure it'll
Well,
come to me later too.
I could talk about how this is, you were mentioning like humanity, which is ironic because we're in this entering into an AI era. At Search Sites, we basically have 3 parts of a triangle at how we define SEO and search. And at the bottom layer is the foundational layer. That's all the stuff that you're familiar with. Everything from those meta descriptions on your website to getting links from reputable websites, that sort of stuff. And where we are right now is in the influence era. And that's kind of what we're talking about with, can I start to add value to actual conversations? It's not really about just writing for the sake of writing, because now eventually like ChatGPT 10 will do a really good job of that. So there is no value in that. The future era that we have, which we feel we're transitioning to, is ironically called the human era. And that's an internet where there's 100 times more content than there is today. And most of it is AI created. And what resonates with people? So, what matters most? And we think it's going to be human connection. And we think it's going to be that thing that's difficult to describe, but it makes you walk away from a conversation that you enjoyed feeling really warm and fuzzy, and also feeling like you somehow connected in a very human level with someone else or some other folks. And we think that that's what the future is going to entail, adding your unique flavor to it, which hopefully has some of your actual experience to it, and being so customer centric in your behavior and your brand standing for something, being authentic, and adding all those
Mhm.
things up, being the perfect choice for someone.
Yes. Oh, I love that. You're speaking our language for sure on this podcast with authentic AI. It doesn't mean that AI tools are bad. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't use AI tools, but it's being thoughtful about how you are using them and making sure that you're not sacrificing your authenticity, your alignment, all that different stuff as you're using these tools. Oh, I know one more question I did want to ask you. What are your thoughts about using AI tools in your business for client work and also with your team members? Because I feel like it's one thing for us to say, okay, we need to learn how to use AI tools authentically for ourselves. But I think it's really important to think about how you use it with your client work, how you have these conversations with your clients and all that different stuff. At this point, there's a lot of people out there using AI tools in ineffective ways. And for me, working with someone on my team, I feel like it would be my responsibility to share with them how I want you to use AI tools in our business. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah. I think the first thing at a company level is the culture. And so I
Mhm.
think when AI tools came out, it's not as bad now, but I think when this stuff came out, it was important for us to basically make public declarations that we're in favor of this for you. We're in favor of you using these tools. We're very down with it taking you less time to do things than it did previously, provided that the quality remains the same or ideally even increases. So I think just giving people permission is the first step in that. And then I think the next step after that is, well, I guess it was easier for us at Search Tides because we've been remote for a while. We've been remote since it was, before it was cool to be remote. And we've had to rely on being a results oriented workplace. So we don't have these like some people do crazy stuff with like monitoring to make sure that you're online and they're very focused on your input. We're
Mhm.
very focused on your output. And so
Mhm.
culturally for us, it wasn't that big of a shift to just be like, hey, use this stuff to improve your output and do your thing. So I think in terms of like client communications, it's the same thing. Ultimately, if we can keep our input the same, meaning we can not change the level of effort that we're putting in for our clients, but we can increase our output, that's fantastic. If you're looking to specifically decrease your input through the use of AI tools, and you're like, well, how do I have a conversation about that with my client? Number one, if you're billing hourly, it's actually pretty difficult too. But if you're not billing hourly and you're just like retainer based, the conversation is just on the output side, which is basically like, we've improved what we're able to deliver for you, or now we're able to deliver more for you at the same quality that we were before. I don't think that anyone would be opposed to those two things. And then the conversation becomes about how can you do that through the use of AI technology? And it's just, but at the front of the conversation, I've talked about the better output that you're getting. I didn't say, hey, we're going to start doing this thing. It's just basically like, hey, good news. You're getting better value. You're getting better service. The reason why is because we figured out a way to use this AI tool to do this thing. And I think a lot of times, my favorite complaint that I've ever heard from clients is when work gets done more quickly and then clients feel that they shouldn't need to pay as much because there wasn't, I don't know, enough elbow grease put in. And my response to that is, so I can get you to your desired outcome today or a month from now, which is more valuable to you? And you go, okay, great. I'm providing more value to you.
Yes, it is so funny when I was just a little itty bitty entrepreneur starting out, and the mindset shifts you have to make when it comes to all of your offers and how much you charge, all the different stuff. But I remember hearing the idea of value based pricing, pricing based on not hourly, more so on the output and all that stuff. My mind was blown. And the same thing can be applied to, of course, with AI tools. I am interested though. You guys said that you don't use AI tools for copywriting or like to create the content. Am I right? Because I think it's also really interesting to think about, especially with content creators or copywriters who may be using AI tools. I've interviewed a couple of copyright lawyers on the podcast. I really am intrigued with how that is all playing out and having conversations with clients when it comes to that stuff, as far as different levels of output and content that you may want to claim copyright protections over. But why have you guys decided not to create content with AI tools specifically?
Create to me is just defined as 100% of all the stuff happens this way. And that's not actually accurate for us. Like, for
Okay.
sure, I think AI tools are amazing for going from 0 to 1. So I think the toughest thing for creating content is staring at a blank page. You're just like, where do I start? And then someone gives you like awful draft and you're like, oh, I know exactly what to do with this. And in the process that we outlined and then we talked about, I think AI plays a really large role in that. I'm sure we have writers that are AI first, AI second. It really doesn't matter to me. The more important thing is just end result. Like, what's the end result? The legal stuff, I think it's going to take a long time for the courts to kind of solve that. And I think it's going to all be higher level than probably anything that any of us are touching. I think it's like 9-figure cases or higher where law is going to be applied. And then everyone else, I just don't think you can actually. I think if you're using gated data, so data that you had to pay for, like what happened with OpenAI and the New York Times, they're like, hey, that was like legitimately our stuff and you had to pay to see it. So you can't just use that for commercial benefit. I think there's a few of those, but everything else is going to be what it is, what it is. If I'm a musician and I really love Taylor Swift and I write a song that subconsciously has some of the overlapping thematic elements of a Taylor Swift song, did I just breach copyright? I mean, you have all of these bands being like, oh, X and X, we love them. They're such an inspiration for us. Like, I don't think that, the Beatles would be considered copyright infringement, but there's a ton of bands that they were inspired from and talked about it all the time in interviews. And so I think it's just going to fall to the side.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. Also, I think that the one thing I really want people to hear is the output focus, the end result focus. That's how I feel too. I had someone ask me the other day about transparency with AI stuff. They're like, we've seen some people put in their email newsletters, either written in collaboration with AI or human made without AI or something. And they're like,
Mm.
how do you feel about that? Okay, well, firstly, every single piece of content that I put out into the world is probably somewhat AI assisted. Sometimes it's not. I'd say it's 50-50, just fully from me or AI assisted, but everything is something that I could have written. And it's up to the quality of work that I hold myself to when it's the content that I create before using AI tools. And I just feel really confident in like, I know that everything I put out there is authentically me, and that's what it is.
Allow me to say something that might rub 80% of people the wrong way.
Oh, okay. Give it to us. Give it to us.
I think that, so I guess I'll start by saying on every photo that photographer from Colorado makes, do they say enhanced in collaboration with Photoshop? Did Vincent van Gogh on the back of all of his paintings say made with the paintbrush of this company X in, where was he, Austria, whatever. So I think historically there's a silly precedent there that's just like creation is creation. And some formats we are like okay with taking complete quote ownership of, and other formats we basically are uncomfortable with that. So here's my hot take. The formats that we're uncomfortable taking ownership of is basically either an insecurity of not being able to, my thesis could potentially be an insecurity of not feeling able to create something, quote, without that assistance, or could simply just be, I think it could just simply just be concerned that it's could potentially be ego. What I believe I am is I am creation, and something that is so clearly happening outside of what I have my entire life known as XYZ. I don't like that. And so I think like ultimately it's about output. Like when we have the ability to, in the future, to think a question and have the answer to the question come up to us, and we're having this exact same conversation, we're going to look back on, do you remember when we had to dialogue with these things and go back and forth and we were thinking that that might not have been us? It's going to be the same way that we're looking at paintbrushes today and we're like, of course that's made with, of course that's us creating. So I think that's where we'll go, but it's just new. It's just new. Yeah.
It's just new.
It's just like we just need to take ourselves a little bit less seriously. At the end of the day, like all of this stuff is supposed to bring out the humanity in us. People are like, AI, it's this, it's good or bad. It's what if we just look at it as neutral? It's neutral and it's whatever we then use it for. And we can use it for some bad stuff and we can use it for some really good stuff. Sounds like something that's pretty neutral to me. Ultimately, I think it's just new. And we're getting used to being in this environment with these things that didn't exist in the way that we know them to exist today. But ultimately, like, we're still the ones creating, and that will always be the case, even if we create stuff that's smarter than us. So we'll see.
Oh man. Okay. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on the show and chatting with us. Can you please share where everyone can connect with you and find Search Tides and check you guys out?
Totally. Thank you. Yeah. So searchtides.com, that's where we're at. You can sign up for our newsletter. We talk about search, AI, the future of business and commerce on LinkedIn at Search Tides, on YouTube at Search Tides. I am on LinkedIn. I don't really do as much posts on there, but I'm Gregory B. Brooks on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Kinsey, for having me.